While out hunting, something terrifying happened to the young boy. A massive lion suddenly appeared before him. Instantly sensing the danger, he quickly pulled his younger brother behind him to shield him. Facing such a powerful beast, he realized that even if he fired his weapon, there was no way to bring it down with a single shot. In that desperate moment, Sergei did something unexpected. He lowered his weapon, trying to show the king of the jungle that he meant no harm. To his surprise, the lion's fierce expression slowly began to soften. But just then, a gunshot shattered the fragile peace. The one who fired was Sergei's father, Nikolai. But Nikolai had miscalculated. The lion roared furiously and leapt at Sergei, sinking its sharp teeth into his body. Nikolai fired shot after shot in a desperate attempt to save his son, but it was no use. The lion carried Sergei away, and in that moment, Nikolai believed his son had no chance of survival. Yet fate quietly turned its gears. The lion's blood seeped into Sergei's wound, and as if some mysterious force had been awakened, their very genes reacted in a strange way. The lion seemed to sense it too. It suddenly dropped the boy and walked away. Against all odds, Sergei survived. But instead of rejoicing at his son's return from the brink of death, Nikolai showed no joy. As a legendary mob figure, he could not tolerate what he saw as Sergei's moment of weakness. He wanted his son to grow with the instincts of a ruthless predator and warned him about the brutal laws of the wild, urging him to one day take over the family business. This harsh upbringing left Sergei torn and deeply wounded inside, but he dared not defy his father.
You never have to be afraid again.
However, when he later saw the lion's stuffed body displayed as a trophy, he could no longer hold back his rage.
He should have killed you!
He locked himself in his room and swore he would never become a cold-blooded monster like his father. His pain only grew heavier when he remembered how his mother had ended her own life after years of abuse. Fueled by anger and disappointment in his family, Sergei decided to leave forever. Before he left, he pulled out a mysterious card that seemed to hold deep meaning for him. But as he carefully climbed onto the rooftop to make his escape, the tiles beneath him cracked. He thought he would crash hard to the ground, but instead he landed lightly on his feet. Sergei couldn't believe what had just happened, but there was no time to dwell on it. He began a long journey to his mother's hometown, a vast grassland in the Russian Far East. While marveling at the breathtaking beauty of nature, a thunderous noise suddenly broke the peace. To his horror, he saw a massive herd of wild buffalo charging straight toward him from the horizon. Faced with such a deadly stampede and with nowhere to hide in the open fields, Sergei could only cover his ears and brace for the worst. But strangely, the buffalo didn't trample him. Instead, they veered to both sides and ran past him. Then he noticed, the lead buffalo had shielded him with its own body. Only after the herd had passed did the Buffalo King finally turn and walk away. That was when Sergei realized he had gained extraordinary powers. Not only could he connect with animals, but his physical abilities were beyond human. With a single throw, he could hurl a spear over 100 meters. His speed rivaled that of a cheetah. He could catch a running deer in an instant. His strength was explosive, his leaps so powerful that even a gentle push from his toes sent him soaring into the air. His hearing had sharpened to the point where he could distinguish the sound of individual water droplets in a canyon stream. Just then, a gunshot echoed through the valley. Sergei quickly climbed a towering tree and spotted two poachers nearly a kilometer away. He rushed to stop them, but it was too late. Dozens of buffalo lay lifeless on the ground. A wave of fury surged through him. Before he could act, the poachers turned on him, threatening him to leave immediately. Those words triggered the beast within Sergei. He grabbed a knife from the ground and charged at them like a wild animal. Under his iron fists, the two poachers had no chance to fight back. Looking at another group of poachers nearby, and then at the fallen buffalo, Sergei made a silent vow. He would seek justice for the animals. 16 years passed, and Sergei had become a legendary assassin. Under the name Kraven, he struck fear into the underworld as one of the deadliest villains ever known. Once a name appeared on Kraven's list, there was no escape. To get close to his next target, he disguised himself as a prisoner and slipped into jail. But as soon as he entered his cell, he realized his cellmate was no ordinary man. To avoid conflict, Kraven made a wager. He told his cellmate that within 3 days he would be free, and if not, the man could do whatever he wanted with him. His cellmate gave him a puzzled look but then smiled knowingly. The next day in the prison yard, two thugs approached, boasting that everything belonged to their boss, Semyon, and threatening to teach the newcomer a lesson. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. With almost no effort, Kraven lifted both men off the ground as if they were weightless. The guards rushed in just in time to stop the fight from turning deadly. Later, Kraven was taken to see the kingpin himself. But he wasn't worried. He knew exactly who this man was, and this meeting was the very reason he had come. The moment the guards let their guard down, Kraven struck. Before the two bodyguards could react, they were already on the ground. Semyon sensed the danger, but it was too late. The commotion drew prison guards from all directions, but Kraven grabbed Semyon and hurled him off the upper level. He then scaled the wall like a lizard and tore open an escape route with sheer strength, triggering deafening alarms. But he was far too fast. No weapon could stop him, and within minutes, he had escaped the prison. Outside, however, an even greater danger awaited him. A massive storm swallowed him whole, and in the blinding snow, he quickly lost his sense of direction. Suddenly, he felt a murderous presence. A tundra wolf appeared, but as Kraven reached out with his telepathic ability, the wolf became calm. Guiding him through the storm, it led him safely back to his extraction team. Afterward, Kraven erased the marks on his body, leaving no trace. By the time the military arrived, all they found was a corpse mauled beyond recognition by wolves. With his mission complete, Kraven returned to the grasslands, only to find poachers once again slaughtering buffalo. This time, he lay in wait along their convoy's path. The poachers thought they could handle him, but they had badly misjudged the man before them. Kraven struck like a raging beast, wiping out an entire truckload of them in mere seconds. The leader panicked and fled, but Kraven memorized his license plate before letting him go. The man returned to his boss to report the disaster, but before he could speak, a crossbow bolt pierced through, ending his life instantly. Kraven crossed the name off his list and quietly closed the door behind him. Guided by scent, he soon found himself standing before a woman. He pulled out the card he had treasured for years, and at that moment, Calypso realized the truth.
You're the boy.
Kraven was the same little boy from long ago. Back when the lion had carried him away, Calypso and her family had also been traveling nearby. She remembered the card clearly.
Think again, Calypso. They show us the unseen road.
Her grandmother had given it to her before their trip, after a fortune reading.
The third card is the outcome. Strength.
Saying it would protect her from danger. Her grandmother had also entrusted her with a mysterious elixir passed down for generations. And perhaps it was fate, but that day when the lion carried the boy in its mouth, it didn't harm him. Instead, when it saw Calypso, there was a strange look in its eyes, as if it were pleading with her. Calypso gently gave Kraven the mysterious elixir, and before parting ways, she handed him the card, wishing it would bring him good fortune. Though the doctors tried everything, Kraven's injuries were too severe, and he was pronounced dead. But just as they prepared to disconnect the machines, something incredible happened. He came back to life. To uncover the truth behind this miracle, Kraven spent 16 long years searching restlessly, until finally he sensed Calypso's presence once again. By this time, she had built a name for herself as a respected lawyer in London. Yet tragedy struck when her mentor was killed while working on a difficult case. Kraven revealed to her that he had already avenged the man's death. The killer was none other than Semyon, the criminal Kraven had eliminated in prison. At first, Calypso doubted him, but when she returned home, she confirmed that Semyon had indeed died behind bars. She sought Kraven out again, and though she agreed that Semyon deserved his fate, she couldn't accept Kraven's ruthless methods, especially knowing he did it only to repay a favor. But while they spoke, far away, news of Semyon's death reached someone dangerous. Rhino. Once just a petty thug under Kraven's father, Rhino had grown ambitious and dangerously powerful. Seeking to expand his empire, he arranged a meeting with Omer, who had once been Semyon's right-hand man.
One of you will be my partner.
At first glance, Rhino didn't look like the terrifying figure his name suggested, but during the meeting he showed his true power. He disconnected a hose attached to his backpack and instantly, his arm began to transform. Alarmed, Omer's men opened fire and dropped Rhino to the ground, but to their shock he didn't die. Instead he stood back up, brushed the dust off, unbuttoned his shirt, and pulled bullets out of his hardened skin as if they were nothing. Once he reconnected the hose, his body returned to normal. Realizing how terrifying this monster truly was, Omer had no choice but to submit. Soon after, Omer arranged a meeting with Kraven's father, Nikolai. Nikolai expressed sorrow over the death of their former boss and promised them shelter, but in truth he wanted to bring them under his own command. Still, Nikolai sensed something was wrong after only a few words, and he was right. Killers sent by Rhino launched a sudden ambush. Fortunately, Nikolai had anticipated treachery and was well prepared, but in the chaos, his younger son Dmitri cowered in fear and hid. Seeing this, Nikolai was furious. He expected Dmitri to act like a man and show strength, not shrink like a coward. When Rhino heard that the assassination had failed, he was enraged, though not surprised. After all, Nikolai was no ordinary man. Around the same time, Rhino's men brought him a USB drive containing footage of Kraven's astonishing prison escape. Realizing that the legendary hunter was actually Nikolai's son left Rhino stunned. He knew that if father and son ever reconciled, it would unleash a bloodbath. Determined to strike first, Rhino sent a bizarre assassin, one with a chilling gift. Anyone who locked eyes with him would fall under instant hypnosis. Meanwhile, Kraven had no idea danger was approaching. Hoping to surprise his brother on his birthday, he climbed a skyscraper barehanded, carefully avoiding all of his father's surveillance systems. At last he reunited with Dmitri. That night, the truth came out. On the evening Kraven had run away from home, Dmitri had begged to go with him, but Kraven had refused. Ever since then, Dmitri had often endured their father's harsh scolding, and Kraven felt guilty for leaving him behind. Although Nikolai constantly crushed Dmitri's confidence, deep down, Dmitri still longed for his father's approval. But Kraven, who had seen through Nikolai long ago, urged his brother to stay far away from their father, calling him nothing more than a heartless villain. Just as Kraven was about to explain further, Nikolai himself appeared. Not wanting to ruin his brother's birthday, Kraven forced a smile and played along. After the party, Kraven spent the night alone in a park. But the next morning when he went to say goodbye, he found Dmitri's room ransacked, and his brother gone. On the bed was nothing but a dark patch of blood. He rushed to the balcony and caught sight of Dmitri being shoved into a car. Without hesitation, Kraven jumped down. The fall meant nothing to him, but he was still one step too late. The kidnapper sped away. Kraven refused to give up. He unleashed his beast-like speed and sprinted after the car. His muscles tensed with power as he rammed into it like a charging bull, then leapt onto the roof in one explosive motion. He smashed at the window, desperate to free his brother, but the vehicle was moving too fast. Thrown off balance, he was forced to let go. The kidnappers took Dmitri to a remote dock, but Kraven was right behind them. Just before the helicopter lifted off, he wrapped a thick net rope around the frame and planted his feet firmly, straining with brute strength to hold it down. When the assassin drew his gun, Kraven tied the rope, dodged the bullets, seized a steel pipe and leapt into the air. The gunner had no time to react before Kraven took him down, but the helicopter finally broke free. In one last desperate attempt, Kraven clung to it as it soared away. Dragged across the sea for hundreds of meters, he was eventually shaken off and thrown into the waves. He could only watch helplessly as his brother disappeared into the distance. With no one else to turn to, Kraven went to Calypso, hoping she could use her connections to track the kidnappers. She agreed, though she warned it would take time. Desperate, Kraven then went to his father, only to discover that Nikolai already knew everything. The kidnappers had sent a severed finger as proof, demanding 20 million in ransom.
It's very simple. You have the money, and he's your son.
To Nikolai, money was meaningless, but as New York's most feared mob boss, bowing to such demands would ruin his reputation. And besides, he believed that even if the ransom was paid, they would never release Dmitri. After weighing his options, Nikolai coldly decided to ignore the demand. For Kraven, it was the final blow. Seeing his father abandon Dmitri without hesitation, he knew he could only rely on himself. He vowed to face the enemy alone and bring his brother back with his own hands. Just then, Calypso returned with a breakthrough. A friend of hers had discovered the kidnapper's base, but fate played another cruel trick. The very friend who gave her the lead was already working for the enemy. Worse, betrayal was something the kidnappers despised, and they soon made that clear. The base itself was hidden on a sheer cliff, but for Kraven, scaling it was effortless. Clinging to the rock like a lizard, he infiltrated the stronghold with ease. The first guard didn't even have time to react before a blade flew into his throat. Kraven moved through the shadows like a phantom, so silent that not even the most alert sentries could sense him. But even the greatest hunter can make mistakes. His presence eventually triggered the alarm. Gunfire erupted, but within seconds, silence returned. The enemies had underestimated him badly. Homer himself tried to fight back, but Kraven's charge sent him flying. Just as Kraven was about to demand his brother's whereabouts, he sensed something deadly. A rocket came screaming toward him. There was no time to dodge. The explosion blasted Kraven and Omer off the cliff, triggering a massive landslide. In that desperate moment, Kraven shielded Omer with his own body from the falling rocks. But as the wall crumbled, he was buried under the debris. Believing him dead, the assassin rummaged through Kraven's body, preparing to take a photo to send to his boss. But to his horror, Kraven suddenly appeared behind him. Before the two killers could react, Kraven struck them down. Meanwhile, Dmitri was brought before Rhino. But instead of hurting him, Rhino surprised everyone by showing an unusual moment of compassion. He looked at the frightened boy and saw his own reflection, a child who had once been neglected by his own father. To gain Dmitri's trust, Rhino decided to reveal his darkest secret. He had undergone brutal biological experiments that turned him into the creature he had become. Though Though those procedures granted him immense strength, they also cursed him with constant, excruciating pain. Despite despising his monstrous form, he held on to a single truth: only the strong were respected. With that belief, he hoped Dmitri would agree to endure the same transformation, so together they could seize Nikolai's criminal empire. But before their plans could unfold, one of Rhino's men rushed in, reporting an intruder. Weapons were drawn at once. Rhino hadn't expected Kraven to arrive so quickly, but when the elevator doors opened, it wasn't Kraven who stepped out, it was the foreigner. With a simple motion, he removed his glasses, and instantly the room was pulled into a swirling hallucination. Like a phantom, he glided down the corridor and appeared directly before Dmitri. The foreigner warned Rhino not to kill Dmitri just yet, insisting that Dmitri was the key to capturing Kraven. He revealed his discovery: Kraven had no vulnerabilities except one, his younger brother. From his pocket, the foreigner produced a strange plant, a rare species from Siberia, the very same used by Kraven to craft his poisoned arrows. If they found where the plant grew, they could track Kraven down. Meanwhile, Kraven, fearing for Calypso's safety, took her deep into his Siberian hideout. The place was lined with research equipment and rare herbs. He had been studying tirelessly, searching for a way to recreate the ancient remedy that had once saved his life. But Calypso confessed she did not know the recipe; it had been lost with her grandmother. At the same time, the foreigner and Rhino arrived, carrying with them a terrifying new poison. Once injected, it forced its victims to face their darkest fears, ravaged their organs, and killed them while they were still trapped inside a nightmare. But before they could act, something stirred in the forest. A cheetah burst from the trees, vanishing just as suddenly as it appeared. In the chaos, Dmitri slipped away into the woods. Rhino immediately sent a search team, unaware they were marching straight into Kraven's trap. The hunt had begun. In the jungle, Kraven moved like a phantom. By the time the assassins raised their weapons, they were already lying dead on the ground. The survivors panicked, but it was far too late to escape. Realizing his men were doomed, Rhino ordered a helicopter strike to bomb the area. Yet Kraven was far too fast, easily evading the explosives. Just as he returned from the carnage, however, a poisoned arrow struck him. His vision blurred, his body swayed, and suddenly he was surrounded by nightmarish visions of spiders. Kraven had fallen into the foreigner's trap. A cruel voice echoed in his mind, breaking his will. He could no longer tell reality from illusion. His limbs grew heavy, his movements sluggish. When he finally struck, he hit nothing but wooden posts. His defenses crumbled, and just as the foreigner moved in for the kill, an arrow pierced his forehead. Calypso had arrived in time. Seeing Kraven fading fast, she used the mysterious elixir once more, pulling him back from the brink. Meanwhile, Rhino received reports from his men and assumed Kraven was dead. Preparing to return to base with Dmitri, he suddenly froze at a terrifying sight. A massive stampede of buffalo was charging toward them. Rhino knew that no one could survive such devastation. Quietly, he detached the hose from his back, his body hardening into armor within seconds. Cars were tossed aside like paper as the raging herd thundered forward, but Kraven was still alive. He caught up quickly. Rhino climbed atop a car, and Kraven attacked first, his flying kick sending Rhino crashing several meters away. The car spun out of control, but Rhino didn't even bother to dodge, letting the force fling Kraven far across the field. He lifted the car once more, ready to crush his foe. Kraven closed the distance with agility, weaving through each strike until he was face to face with his enemy. But his blows had no effect. Rhino's armor shrugged them off. Instead, one crushing counter sent Kraven flying dozens of meters. Dizzy and dazed, he tried to rise, but Rhino charged again with terrifying speed, leaving him no chance to fight back. With a brutal strike, Rhino sent both Kraven and a truck soaring through the air, pinning him beneath the wreckage. Rhino smirked in triumph, certain the battle was his. But Kraven rose again, battered but unbroken, only to be captured once more by Rhino's overwhelming power. As darkness closed in, Kraven's sharp eyes caught something: Rhino's hidden weakness. Summoning every last ounce of strength, he drove a metal rod into it. Rhino roared in agony, releasing him. Enraged beyond reason, the beast attacked wildly. Kraven seized the moment. He pulled out a steel cable, wrapped it tightly around Rhino with lightning-fast reflexes, and hurled the other end toward the sky, fastening it to a charging buffalo. The massive herd trampled Rhino, shattering his arrogance and leaving him barely alive. But the battle was not the end. Kraven soon confronted his father, only to learn the bitter truth. It had been Nikolai who sent the prison break footage to Rhino. When pressed, Nikolai didn't deny it. He admitted he had known all along that the mysterious hunter was his own son. He had reached out to Rhino in secret, using Kraven's bond with Dmitri as bait, hoping to remove his son through another's hand. Kraven's heart sank with disappointment, but he could not bring himself to kill his father. Just as he turned to leave, a bear's roar thundered from the jungle. Nikolai panicked, seizing his rifle, only to discover the bullets were gone. At the very moment Kraven loosened his grip, the beast lunged and sealed his fate. A year later, Kraven returned for Dmitri's birthday. To his shock, his once timid brother had now risen to power, taking complete control of their father's empire. The sight unsettled him. He did not want Dmitri to become the next Nikolai. After the celebration, Kraven tried to reason with him, but what he discovered left him shaken to the core. Dmitri had secretly joined the doctor's experiment long ago. The brother Kraven once knew, weak and quiet, had orchestrated everything in silence. Even Kraven himself had been nothing more than a pawn on Dmitri's chessboard. And now, this cunning chameleon was ready to unleash a catastrophe unlike anything the world had ever seen. If you liked the video, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more interesting videos.